I would love to know about your childhood, starting there. What made you want to be an actress, how you got connected in the business, and
Okay.
take off
Well, I had a very famous mother, Sally Kirkland Sr., we'll call her. And she had been fashion editor of Vogue, and then for 25 years she was fashion editor of Life, back when Life was the news, the 40s, 50s, 60s. And because she used the byline Sally Kirkland, I always had an inferiority complex that I was Sally Jr. And so I was very proud of her. She did things like bring Italian fashions to this country, and the no bra look and the mini skirt and hippie chic, and all the Italians and the French, Christian Dior, whatnot. She and Diana Vreeland and Eugenia Shepherd were the fashion group. So everybody that was a fashion star had been approved by these three ladies. So you can imagine my life as a child. I was being pranced down as a kid model, celebrity model, in the, you know, what do you call it, the showrooms and the fashion shows, along with young Carolyn Lee and young Tuesday Weld and young, oh, there's a third that you would know. It'll come to me later. And then I would be in the fashion magazines posing, and my father came from mainline Philadelphia and he wanted me to be a debutante, so I was a debutante. And at the same time, I was always a rebel, and partially because my mother was the first person to hire a black photographer for Life magazine, and Henry Luce said, no, 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 and she said, well, then I'll quit my job. And so she was a rebel in so many ways. And I got involved with acting so that I would have a distinct voice aside from hers. And so I went to the Valley Drama Camp at 10 and did Shakespeare, did some Midsummer Night's Dream. And then all through high school, I was the president of the drama club. And
is this in New York?
Well, I was initially at Nightingale Bamford, New York. Then I went to the master's school, Dobbs Ferry, New York. And I always went to all-girls schools, so I always played men because I'm 5'9". So that really helped my acting, playing men at a very young age, because it gave I'd use such vocal power and such strength to pull on to convince you that I was a guy, you know. And so I didn't want to go to college. I always knew I wanted to go right off Broadway, and I did when I was 17 or 18, and put in 10 years on stage in New York. That was the 60s, so it was the sexual revolution in the arts. And so in 1968, I became the first nude actress in American history with Terrence McNally's play Sweet Eros. Before Hair, before O Calcutta, was a member of the La Mama troupe with Tom O'Horgan, who went on to direct Hair, etc.
And your parents were okay with that?
Well, my father was not at all. My mother, being so hip, you know, she was okay. But the Kirkland family from Philadelphia, everyone was very, I don't think they talked to me for about a year. I was on the cover of Screw magazine writing a 500-pound sow nude, which was in the movie Futz. And Tom O'Horgan just took a still out of the film, and the next thing you know, I'm on the cover of Screw magazine. So being a 60s rebel was definitely part of it all. In the La Mama troupe, we were constantly being told in the New York Times that we should be put in jail, you know. And there would be police lined up at the back of the theaters because we were doing things that you just didn't do. In one play, Changes by Megan Terry, I was running for president against Frederick Forrest, who was running for president, and I had on a dress, and that covered up, forgive my cell phone in the background, that covered up a bodysuit with a penis and hair on my chest, and then I would be unzipped out of that, and I would be my nude self. Frederick Forrest, the same thing in reverse. So Walter Kerr had a field day with that, you know, and said these people should be in prison, what are they doing? And it was the sexual revolution in the arts, you know, way ahead of its time. So I like to think I was doing what Madonna eventually did,
right,
way back in the 60s. And I got quite a lot of notoriety in the 60s. I couldn't get in any taxi cab without the cab driver knowing who I was. There was so much publicity around my nudity.
How old were you when you did that? Your first nude?
68.
Like early 20s or?
No, more like 27 or
Okay,
so.
late 20s.
I'm not very good at math, but I remember it was 1968. And Jamie Rado and Jerry Ragney asked me to be in Hair, but Tom O'Horgan wouldn't let me out of the La Mama troupe, where I was starring in Tom Paine, about the revolutionary, and Futz, like I told you about. And so then when I saw what Hair was going to become, the first time Terrence McNally called me and said, I wrote this for you, and will you do it? And you'll be nude for 45 minutes. And I said yes, because I wanted to beat Tom O'Horgan at his own game, you know. And there I was. I had already done nudity with the La Mama troupe in Tom Paine with a gossamer veil in front of me. And very famous critic Clive Barnes said in the papers, he said, you know, that the nudity was done with such grace and such beauty, and that was the very first time anyone in the papers talked about it, you know, legitimately. Because in our minds, we were doing a revolution. You know, we couldn't stand the war in Vietnam. The New York Times called me up. I was the first nude picture on the cover of Arts and Leisure. And I was sitting in a chair like this, but it was my back, and the side, you could see part of my breast and my arm. And that was the very first nudity ever in the New York Times. And they called me and they said, why are you doing this? You know, you're famous for doing Shakespeare with Joe Papp and this and that. And I said, well, I'm opposed to the Vietnam War, and you can't carry a gun on a naked body. And I'm also a painter, and I paint women. And I think women should be proud of their bodies no matter what. They shouldn't have to worry about what Playboy's doing, you know.